Hi there, my name's Barry Gardner and welcome to this short video on mastering drum and bass. So my exposure to drum and bass was initially through listening to happy hardcore music in the early 90s. You would find there'd be lots of pirate radio stations on as I grew up in London, and I would listen to these stations at the weekend. And as time moved on, a style of hardcore called jungle appeared essentially, and it was a little bit darker, had a bit more of a sort of reggae influence, I suppose, with the bass lines, and also you'd have MCs toasting over the top of it, so it was a bit of a split off from happy hardcore. And essentially I listened to that. It was a big part of my weekends. I used to enjoy listening to this music and going out to the occasional rave as well, so it was a music that I still enjoy up until this day in its various guises and subgenres. So whether you're doing clean, minimal stuff, liquid, rollers, or dark and dirty drum and bass, I've got a lot of experience in listening to and mastering this type of music. So a bit about my engineering background. I've got 20 years experience as a sound engineer, 10 years of experience working as the head engineer of an audio production company based in London. I used to record bands and music on a daily basis. In fact, even a few MC sessions over drum and bass in a sort of mirrored broadcast studio. That was probably for One Extra or for Radio 1 at the time. For the last 10 years, I've been operating Safe and Sound Mastering, which has been very successful. As you can see here, it's a high-end service. You have a high-end analog rack here and the PMC IB1S monitors behind me. They're a large format monitor, 10-inch driver, soft dome mid-range, and a very detailed, highly responsive tweeter. Large format, they're a big speaker. They're on custom-made stands on essentially a concrete blocks on the floor with neoprene sort of isolation pads underneath them. The room's fully treated. There's actually 28 bass traps in this room, and one of them's virtually 2 meters deep, because you really need that kind of size of bass trap to linearize the low end in such a room. And for drum and bass music, you need to know that your music's going to sound great when it comes out of something like a Function 1 or an Element 5 sound system at a festival or in the club. So a little bit more about the analog rack. We've got a Manley Massive Passive, a Summit Audio DCL 200, an HCL Veris, and a Sontec clone equalizer that's at the bottom, and of course the Crane Song DAC that's there. Clearly it's a high energy dance music, so the goal when mastering it, as well as your job of mixing and producing the tracks, is moving feet on the dance floor. That's the bottom line. It is high impact dance music after all. Now, as I've been working with drum and bass a long time, and as I'm sure you're aware, most releases are fairly up there on the loudness, on the perceived volume scale, and they still tend to be irrelevant of any streaming services and volume normalization. It's still the norm that drum and bass is it's up there with the loudest dance music that's out there. So I have all the tools and techniques in order to get your volume up as transparently as it's possible to do so, making it while still making it sound as good as it possibly can do. A lot does depend on your mix, so you need to have a good, well-balanced mix across the spectrum, and once that's obtained, then we can sort of get the volume up. So as far as drum and bass goes, I do offer a free mix appraisal if you would like that, if you're just starting out, or if you've got a room that you're not too sure about how the bottom end's sitting in the mix, then please don't hesitate to ask, and I'll give you a free mix appraisal once the job's actually proceeding. So once the job's been paid for, I'm more than happy to report back on your mix and give you some tips. Conversely, if you don't want feedback, that's also fine. For experienced drum and bass producers, you won't need it, and I'll just crack on and get on with my job essentially. Mastering drum and bass, just like any music, has to have quality control, so there'll be double checks on the overall spectrum, the imaging, listening for deflects such as clicks and other extraneous noises in the mix that shouldn't be there, but also ensuring that the kick and bass is kept punchy and keep the forward moving energy in the tracks. That's all important for the dance floor. So if you want me, Barry Gardner, to master your drum and bass tracks, then please don't hesitate to get in contact with me. You can do so via email or via telephone, and I look forward to hearing your music in due course. And thanks very much for watching this short video on mastering drum and bass.